Hey, welcome back, Liberty and Law students. Good to see you again, although I'm not getting to see the first day of classes. I'm working at home while you guys are at school, at least for those of you in my Monday, Tuesday class. Hopefully I'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, and see you then in person. But until then, another video going over some information, and probably the plan was to do a lot of information via videos anyways. A, because it's really hard to talk with a mask on for very long, and B, more importantly, it's a little safer way to go about doing things because the less people are talking, the less we're creating aerosols, the new phrase, and I'm very sincere about that. I think we need to take it seriously, but the less risk involved. So the videos work a little better. Again, hopefully I'm back tomorrow, Tuesday, and I can do some Q&A stuff for those of you in the Monday, Tuesday classes, and probably Friday for that. Back in our guest bedroom, I spruced things up a little bit. I put up a poster from an organization I love, Gilder Lehrman. We may use some things from them in our class. It's a poster of the Boston Massacre. I use that poster in my History 120, my college History 120 class. We refer to it as Boston Massacre. The British at the time, and this is some connections to the world we live in and how we see things. To the British at the time, the Boston Massacre was no massacre. It was a riot. Those colonists, those unruly colonists were rioting, causing problems. Think about those connections and think about some of the things going on in the world today. So, if I get time, maybe I'll take you back there and get you a closer look. I feel like I kind of sound like Mr. Nuremberg here, so I'm not near as funny as him, though, so I would never claim that. All right, these videos have been long, so I need to get to it. Liberty and Law, and this video is specific for Liberty and Law students. I think all the videos I've put up so far have been the same for each class, but the video I'm doing now is an overview specific for, in this case, Liberty and Law. I apologize for the bad lighting, the shadows. Again, I'm not a videographer. I'm doing the best I can with a webcam and a computer. So those of you that maybe are an EMP, bear with me. Don't tell your teachers. I'm doing the best I can. Liberty Law is a really special class, and I mean that sincerely. It's a special class to me. This is my 10th year in Middle College, at Middle College as a teacher, 26th year teaching, and for a good chunk of those 26 years, the one class that I have been teaching is Liberty and Law. It's American Government Constitution class. Why the district calls it Liberty and Law, I don't know. That goes back at least to the early 70s, if not further back. I don't know why we don't just call it American Government and Constitution or civics like other districts do. It's beyond me, beyond my control. It is what it is. I think, obviously, history, social studies are highly important. And I think understanding our government, our Constitution, how the system is built, and the ideas and the philosophies behind it are critical for our world to work properly, especially in the world that we are living in today. I can't emphasize how strongly. A lot of you I know are probably shaking your head right now going, Mr. Stone, I hate this stuff. It's boring. It's dry, dusty facts, and it has nothing to do with me. And I respect your opinion. I understand why you might feel that way, but I strongly, strongly, strongly disagree. And hopefully, when you walk out of my class, you feel differently. What I hope is that you walk out of my class with more questions about our government, our Constitution, the history of all that, how it works. And you might think that's kind of strange, but the reason for that is if you walk out with questions, more questions than you had when you walked in, that means you started thinking about this stuff. And that's what I want to happen. I don't want to give you answers. I want it to cause you to think and ask questions. And when people get questions in their head, what do? They try to go find answers, and they keep learning. The learning won't stop in this class. At least that's my goal. I hope you walk out of here going, I want to know more. I want to learn more about this stuff. That's my goal. And so it's okay to have questions. In fact, one of the things I'm going to emphasize is there are no right answers. And you may change your viewpoints and perspectives many times throughout your life. I found I have, especially in regards to these things. So it's just dear to me. It's important to me. I think it's important, not just in terms of the job you're going to have, but just your life in general. I could go on for more about that and rant, but we need to move on. I'll probably talk about that more at some points in the class, either in person or through video. This is important for you as a student because in order to graduate from high school, it is a state law, it is a federal law that all students have to pass an American Government and Constitution class. It's also a district requirement. There is no way around this. I know there are a lot of alternative ways out there that exist to getting a high school degree today. In all of those programs, regardless of what you do, if you want a high school diploma, you will have to take some form of an American Government Constitution class. It is required for graduation across the country. There's no working around it. I know you hear from teachers, oh, you got to have this class, it's a requirement. And you'll hear, oh, people find ways around some of those things. That is not the case with liberty law or American government. You have to take it somewhere along the way. Now, some of you, if you've been in other districts at some point, maybe you've occasionally have a student who's had this at another point in their high school career, not in middle school or junior high, but in high school. If that's the case, let me know. We'll get connected with Miss Loveland and we'll figure that out. But for the time being, you'll stay with me and we'll get through this. So you have to have this to graduate. As I said, it is a half in Springfield schools. It is a half social studies credit. To graduate from Springfield Public Schools, you have to have 25 full credits. And in those 25 full credits, you have to have 3 social studies credit. You have to have a full credit of U.S. history, which most people take as a freshman, a full credit of world history, which most people take as a sophomore. That's in Springfield. And then you have to have a half credit of American government. And then last of all, a half credit elective. And I teach a lot of different electives, so I may see some of you again in an elective course. I'm sorry. It's a necessary evil. I'm the only social studies teacher in the program. You're stuck with me. But you'll get through it. It's okay. But some of you may have already had those electives, and so I may only see you in this class, but I may see you again because you may have me for just a general elective course. But it is a half credit. Now, one of my big rants, ask everybody that's had me, you'll probably hear this daily, believe that this course should be a full credit. And again, I will rant about that later because time is important here. But I really wish it was a full credit because there's just so much to cover and it's so important and it's just almost impossible to get it all in. But we'll do the best we can. As I said, most people take this in Springfield their junior or senior year. There are other districts that take it. Students take that government course as a freshman. In Southwest Missouri, that's pretty uncommon, but there are places that do that. If that's the case with you, let me know. We'll get in touch with Miss Loveland, like I said. We try to get this in everybody's junior year, if at all possible. That way, it's not hanging over your head in your senior year. Sometimes it doesn't happen. So in those cases, we really try to get it in the first semester. I've had a few rare exceptions last spring where I had a student or two that didn't get it until the spring semester. And we'll get there. But you don't have to worry about that. It's fall semester. You're here now. And we're going to get through this. There are some requirements built into the course that you have to meet in order to pass the course. One of the things that you will have to do is to pass or take, you don't have to pass, but you have to complete the state mandated government EOC. That will occur in late November, early December. I know that you won't be with me then. We'll figure that out at that time. And I would say that's somewhat tentative because of COVID. Last year that got waived. I don't know where that's at, but right now we'll move forward as if we will have to take that. And I will do some things to get you ready for that. Don't stress about it. We want you to do the best you can, but it's not going to cause you to fail the course if you don't do well. But you do have to take that EOC. And we'll deal with that, and I'll talk more about it as we get nearer or further down the line. You also have to take, and again, these I do not agree with these mandates. I feel like they are misguided. They may be well-intentioned, but they're misguided. Again, I would go back to, if you want to make a difference, make this a full credit class. But another requirement that occurred in recent years is that in Missouri, you now have to take a 100-question Constitution test and pass that with a 70 or above. Again, as students who've had me in the past, I really dislike this law. Again, I could rant a long time about it, but I'm not going to now because I'm already at 10 minutes and I need to get this moving. The reality is we have to pass it with a 70 or above. What you need to know is don't stress about that. I will work with you on that. I will get you through that. I have not had a student that has failed my class because they didn't pass the 100-question Constitution test. We'll worry about that in the last couple of weeks of class. I have a process for getting us through that, where I will work with you. I can be flexible. There are things like retakes. There is the possibility of resources. Again, I'll tell you more later, so don't let that stress you out now. We will get there, as long as you work with me. There will be a seated final for this class, and I, as I said in an earlier video, I'm not a big fan of traditional tests. But in this class, I need to do that for a couple of reasons. But I will be giving a seated final on finals week. But don't stress again about that. It will be very short. It will be very structured. It's going to cover basic information. A lot of that information is stuff that we will have covered just prior to the final. So it'll be a lot more like just a unit exam with some of the big ideas that I will hammer at all semester included in that, and I will get you through it. This isn't in my script, but I just thought of this. I also have to cover Missouri government and Constitution in this class. That's always a squeeze. There may be one day dedicated to that. You will have a quiz test over that because as a state law, you have to take a test over Missouri government Constitution and pass that with a 70 or above. I'll tell you right now, that will be a 10-point quiz. There will be 12 questions, so you could potentially get 2 bonus points. That gives you some wiggle room. You have to get 7 out of 10 to pass, and you can retake it. We'll get there. Again, I need to pause. Okay, I'm back. Sorry for the interruption. 12 minutes in, I don't want to have to restart this. I thought the dog was in here with me. He was outside. He was at the door crying. So you may hear him wander in here in a minute. Missouri government and Constitution. I'll get you through that at the end of the course. 7 out of 10 on that quiz. You can retake it. It'll be pretty straightforward. I know, hopefully, that you've looked at the syllabus at this point. If you want a sense of what we're going to try to cover in the class, you should look at the major instructional goals and the pacing guide that is within that. I have linked that in the script that I'm using and will be just below this video. To be real honest, we will be lucky to make it through Theme 1, Historical Foundations. And I'm putting this on tape. So, man, I hope I don't get called to the table on this. We'll be okay because that's one reason why this should be a full credit. But again, I will incorporate a lot of the other information from a lot of the other themes into Theme 1. So just bear with me. We'll get through it. But just know those other themes will not be hit as heavily. That, again, my rant. This should be a full credit course. Current events. And I know a lot of you are like, oh no, again, I don't care, Mr. Stone, especially where we live in because we've been overwhelmed with current events. But I think as a social studies teacher, it is very important that you know what's going on in the world you live. I don't expect you to be a CNN or Fox News junkie, but check in to a news source once or twice a day. Find one that you like, CNN, USA Today. There's a lot of good news sources out there online. there's a lot of really bad ones too, so be careful. I'll talk more about that later, and that's a critical skill involved in this class I'll talk about in a little bit. But it's important to be aware of what's going on, especially in this class. That's one of the reasons this class is so important, because it's going to hopefully help you get what's going on in the world that we live in. And it's especially true in the time we live in with everything that's going on. COVID, it's an election year. It's a particularly interesting election year, a very different election year for a lot of reasons, a lot of social movements, lots of things going on, and a lot of that will connect to things that we will cover in this class. I will incorporate current events into the class, again, because we're doing things very differently. I don't know if I'll be able to do that as much as I usually do, but I will try to do that to some degree throughout the course. We'll have probably at least one or two, hopefully, specific current event classes, where current event lessons or assignments or activities where you'll be connecting what you've learned with things in the news, and I'll talk more about that later. I talked about grades in the course procedures video that I did for everybody, but again, for this class, most of your grades are just going to be based on the basic assignments that I'm putting up in Canvas, and a lot of those are very, very basic, simple things. Again, I always try to utilize a lot of different activities, a variety of things, but in trying to keep things simple, may not be able to do that quite as much, because I think the simplicity right now is more important to keep your life simple. But I also try to utilize a lot of resources, and I hopefully can still do that. Again, I don't like traditional tests and quizzes, but this class does have a limited number of quizzes that I will give you in it. One of the things I'll do, and I'll talk more about later, is we'll do some what are called EOC quizzes. One of the things you're going to do next week is to take a practice EOC quiz. And we'll use that to take a couple of practice EOC quizzes through the course. Probably not as much as usual, again, because of our unusual information. There will be some content quizzes, but again, those will be over short chunks of information. And you'll probably see more of those as we get near the end of the course. There will be a test. The only really traditional test will be the final. That's going to be the closest thing to a traditional test that you'll encounter. And again, I'll try to make that more like a quiz, and it'll be over shorter chunks of material. Most of that, things that we've covered towards the end of the class. On quizzes, tests, all of those things, retakes are always allowed. There's other modifications that I will utilize and build in. We'll talk about that as we get to it. I will work with you on everything in the class, including tests and quizzes. Just know that. Know that I'm on your side. 18 minutes. Wow. So I'm getting close to wrapping up here. A little bit just about social studies, history, living law in general. I think a lot of people come into the class thinking that it's just memorizing facts and Jeopardy knowledge. And I don't like that. In fact, if that's what social studies and history is about, I'm in big trouble, because there's a lot of things that I don't have memorized that the history teacher should really have memorized. I'm not going to make you memorize the preamble. I'm not going to make you memorize all 27 amendments. You can Google those things. You can Wikipedia those things. Now, that said, there are facts that are important. There's some basic things you need to know. Declaration of Independence, 1776. Basic things. I think having a sense of chronology is much more important than memorizing specific dates, names, and facts. So it's not about memorization for me. What it is more about is things like critical thinking, and I mentioned that earlier. The ability to assess information and determine if it's legitimate, determine the biases involved in it, determine the perspectives involved in it, and also about making connections, seeing how the past connects to today, seeing how it reflects on today and influences where we are today. And to me, one of the biggest reasons that history and social studies is important is it's about introspection. When you learn about history, when you learn about society, in the end, you're going to learn about yourself as an individual. And that may seem strange to you, but I think it's very true. And I hope that you'll have a better sense of that as we move through the course. And you'll also have a better sense of the society that you live in. More often than not, there are no black and white answers. And I think that frustrates a lot of people a lot of times in social studies classes because that's what they want. I think that's something we're dealing with right now in regards to COVID and a lot of other things. We want black and white answers. And unfortunately, a lot of times those things don't exist. One of my favorite Charlie Brown comic strips has, I believe, Charlie Brown saying something to the effect of, life is not like a math book. You can't look at the back and find the answers. And I'm not dogging math classes. By the way, I used some math to hang that poster today. So shout out to Mr. Myers. You can share that with him. Math is important in a lot of ways, and it connects to us in a lot of ways. But life itself is not a math class. Probably one of the best places to learn that is math itself. But I think social studies really illustrates that too. Norms. I mentioned that in my video about class procedures. Not in my class. I like typically class discussions and dialoguing with you guys. I'm going to get to do that as much. Again, as I said earlier, it's not safe for us. But there's other ways we can achieve some of that communication and issues. And in doing that, and again, a long rant I usually give about this, but in social studies classes, we're going to touch on things that are sensitive and people have strong emotions about. And everybody's going to have different perspectives, and that's okay. But in order to do that in a safe and productive environment, we're gonna create some norms. And key to those norms is understand it's okay for others to have different perspectives and different opinions. Everybody's shaped by the lives that they've lived and the things that have happened in their lives. We always have to remember that when interacting with others. It is important to listen, and in communication, a lot of times we think about the talking, but also just as important is the listening. And I know you guys hear that a lot, but the listening and asking questions. We don't ask enough questions. We always try to give answers. Let's ask questions. So we'll talk more about that as we go. What I want you to understand is I believe every human being is of value. And because of that, every person deserves to be treated with respect. And I want everybody in my room treated in that manner by me and by each other. And so hopefully we'll get those norms in place by the end of next week. And that will help that. Again, it's not going to be as involved as what I usually do. All right, I'm right here at the end. Maybe the shortest video I've made so far for things. And this is at 22 minutes. So that's not saying much. Hey, this is good stuff. I love social studies. I love working with students. I love it when students start making those connections and seeing how it relates to them. And that's what I hope. I hope when you walk out of my class, as I said earlier, you will walk out, with more questions than you had when you walked in. The biggest question is probably going to be, why do they let Stone teach? Man, I can't believe that they let this guy teach. They do. It's a miracle. 26 years. But hopefully you'll walk out seeing how it relates to you, understanding that you are significant in the world that we live in. You make a difference. You will have and can have an impact. I fully believe in the butterfly phenomenon. Your perspective matters and is valuable, and others do as well. And we've got to listen to those, and again, ask questions and seek to understand. And you can all make a difference. Just recently, we lost a civil rights, an American icon, in John Lewis, who was a congressman for many years from the state of Georgia, that had also been active in the civil rights movement, in the freedom rides, had worked closely with people like Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, and he talked about one of his phrases was "good trouble," and that's somebody to look to. But if you know where John Lewis came from, and he talks about this in his story, he came from an incredibly poor sharecropping family in Alabama, and I don't know that anybody, when they saw him when he was 15, 16, would have said, this guy's going to be an icon in American history. But he is. He's made a huge difference in the world. And I think John Lewis would say that there's a lot of other people that we don't know their names that were right there beside him that made a difference as well. And that can be you. That will be you guys. And I want you to understand that. I think that's something that you can take away from all the social studies classes, but especially Living Law class. One reason I like this poster. The poster's gone. My door's open to the laundry room now. The masses of the people in Boston. It wasn't just one person. It wasn't just Thomas Paine. There were a lot of people that we don't know their names that played a role in that. So that's Living Law in a nutshell for you. I'm excited about the semester ahead. I'll talk to you guys later.